He's here.
Huh?
He's here. He's getting all of us.
Yes. These parasites, as you mentioned, like vampires sucking out energy, which are the jinn, which are the demons, which are the invisible and negative entities. Their behavior, this parasitical behavior, sucking out energy, mirrors what big tech is also doing. It's like bullies. This big tech is bullying us with the technology that we are stuck with. They're bullying our attention, they're bullying our minds and sucking our energy, in a similar way to how even the big pharma is doing. They're bullying us into taking their poisons, yeah, and sucking our energy. It's like these parasites seems to be mirrored from these entities to big tech to big pharma. You know, it's sorcery and witchcraft throughout all of these.
It sounds like something that the demons would love.
Yeah,
Exactly. After sunset, it gets worse, the voices, right?
Yeah. Yep.
And the only way for us to get salvation is for those who believe and who do good work.
I think that do good work is it's critical, because you can have all the faith you want in the world.
Exactly.
And if you don't do good work, if you don't do good stuff,
yes.
what good is that faith?
This, I'm sure you recognize this new age positive movement that's out there, you know, trying to train everyone into positive thinking. What I see is, for example, and I'm not criticizing Joe Dispenza, but I see him as one of the leaders in getting people to train themselves out of negativity and into positivity. But the problem is, as you rightly said, that you're still believing that these thoughts are your own thoughts. Yeah. So when you're doing that, as you said, that means that there's something wrong with you. So no matter how much you're trying to train yourself into positive thinking, it's like as if you're trying to do something shackled, you know, because you're accepting that, yeah, you're weak, you're the one with the problem, because it's still your own thought. But the second, as you said, you separate this, that's it. There's a weight lifted, there's a freedom. Now you're stronger, and now you can actually make progress. I completely agree. So this is why we're doing this today. Yeah.
I've had some, one schizophrenic wrote me and said, now that I know that the voices aren't me,
yeah,
I can handle this.
Yes. Yep.
You know,
yeah.
And that's the same way with, they hit all of us. It's not just schizophrenics. They hit schizophrenics worse than they do everybody else, but they hit us all.
Right.
You know, they will put, they have complete access to your lower mind. You know, they can pull up every rotten thing that you've ever done,
right,
and rub it in your face. You know, if they'll go, why did you say that? Or why did you do this thing? Or, you know, who did you offend? I mean, it just goes round and round and round. Those are not your thoughts. And Sherry Sweeney, my co-author in the book we wrote, she said that every negative thought you have about yourself or anybody else comes from the dark side. It doesn't belong to you.
Yep. You said it's like the brain is like a radio receiver receiving signals. Yeah.
Right. Yeah. And where you tune that tuner to is the signals you're going to pick up. Now with schizophrenics, it's like that receiver is jammed on the negative frequency, a very low frequency. And if they try to force it into a positive frequency, like you were saying, it just gets turned back. You know, it's like some rubber band is tied to it, and you force it, and then it just snaps back to where it was. And, you know, on top of that, you have negative programming that everybody is subject to. You know, because you're born into a world where the program is already there. You're born into it.
Well, I mean, on that, if I can, just to give viewers another example, and maybe you can tell me if I'm right or wrong on this. You gave the example of like a radio receiver, and I was thinking, so you're saying that these thoughts, they're not you. Although they're inside you, they're not you. So I was thinking a bit like my email account or my WhatsApp account. I get all kinds of information in there, but it doesn't mean that is me.
Right.
You know? So I'm getting news, I'm getting all kinds of news. It could be good news, it could be negative news, right? Or there could be even filth that's being sent to me. But just because it's on my WhatsApp account or on my email account, it doesn't mean it's me. So that's like a similar example. That's how the brain is. We're being sent all kinds of information. So just because it's in there, it doesn't mean it's you. Yeah.
Yeah. And you don't have to listen to it. That's your choice.
Right, right.
You know, you do not have to attend to it.
Yeah.
So where you put your attention, your energy goes with it.
Yeah.
So if you're putting your attention on negative stuff, your energy's flowing into negative stuff. So the researchers started giving these drugs to monkeys and rats and mice and found that the same thing happened. Of course, they didn't cover that. That doesn't hit the mainstream news at all. They don't let it into the journals. But these drugs that they're using cause organic neurological damage with enough use. And so do their shock treatments. In the long run, if they're on these drugs for a long period of time, they're doing a lot more damage than they're doing good.
Is this not modern day sorcery?
It is.
Yeah.
And they're getting away with it.
Yeah.
They're making $14.7 billion selling antipsychotic drugs worldwide that are damaging people.
Yeah. Brother Igor says in the chat that pharmakia is the term for sorcery in Greek. And Brother Imran is saying that pharmacy and Pharaoh seem to be connected, like going back to the time of Moses and Pharaoh, the magic. We've got lots of these lessons in the Quran. It's just, this is the first time, obviously, we're in conversation, but there's so much we've been discussing ourselves that it's just hard to see where to begin from, because everything you talk about is extremely relatable to everything that is in the Quran, whether that is magic, being in the form of fear. I'll leave you to tell the story, Jerry, but there's just so much. It's just hard to tell where to begin with.
Well, that's good to hear, because I've never read the Quran myself.
Right. Yeah, we have.
That's why we were so excited to speak to you, because your research is corroborated by the Quran, and us. We have been studying the Quran, and we have been seeing these things as well.
Yeah.
In the Quran, it's also Satan says to Allah that I will attack them. By them, it's implying Banu Adam, the children of Adam. Satan says to Allah, he will attack them from every direction, from above, from below, and we can see this now. They have hijacked the weather. They have hijacked the environment. They have hijacked the food. They have hijacked medication. They have hijacked even us. Our genome is under their control, and they have attacked us from everywhere. There is no escape route. So we can see this in our lives. Satan has done this.
Yeah. If anyone has any verses, please do share so that I can bring them up for Jerry. But yeah, the verse that you were speaking about is where Satan says in the Quran that he's going to get them from behind and in front and from the right and from the left. And a lot of people have said that this means, well, not a lot of people, some people say that this means, and the reason why I want to bring this up is because you mentioned how these entities, they bring up your memories, which is things of the past. So people say that when Satan says he's going to get us from behind, they say, oh, that's your depression from what happened before. And when Satan says he's going to get us from in front of us, it's what is we're anxious about what is coming before us. And when he says that he's going to come from the right and the left, it's some people say that that's pulling us to the extremes, extreme two choices that he always seems to kind of give us. But most of the time, the case is both options are a falsehood, So yeah, there is this, and the fact that people will ultimately become very ungrateful to the Creator as a result. Or so if anyone does have the verses, please do put them in the chat.
Well, I think it'd be a good idea to give Jerry maybe the context of where it all began.
Yeah.
Before even mankind comes down to earth, that this hatred, this jealousy, that started in the heavens, then you get the context of where did this hatred even begin?
Yeah.
Right. So when I guess the story starts where Allah asks the angels, including Iblis, which is the chief devil, to prostrate to Adam as an act of following the command of God. And Iblis, the chief devil, he said, "Why should I bow down to a lesser creation?" Right. So so he looks at Adam as in he's lower than me. How can I bow down to someone that has less power than me? So he looked at him at his physical being and was completely void of the spiritual side of Adam, right? So, and then he makes an agreement with God that, you know, give me till the day of judgment, and I'm going to destroy them. I'm going to sit on the path. So he's sitting on the path that we're trying to find to misguide all of us.
Yeah.
And
the path of truth.
Yep. So if I can,
which is the path of truth, which is the path that we're trying to all, you know, to be on.
So if I can show Jerry the context to that verse, so yeah, he says he's going to come. So I just want.
He's here. He's here.
Huh?
He's here.
He's here. Yeah. Who's here?
He's getting all of us.
Yes.
There's one verse in the Quran that really grabbed my attention. You know, even though people send me verses every once in a while, and this was sent by Dr. Ermark, and I think he's in Egypt.
Right.
Okay, I was dealing with him for a while. It's chapter 114 of the Quran.
Yes.
And it says, "In the name of God, the gracious, the merciful, say, I seek refuge in the Lord of mankind, the King of mankind, the God of mankind, from the evil of the sneaky whisperer, who whispers into the hearts of people from among the jinn and among the people."
Right.
I mean, that hit right on. I mean, that was like a direct hit.
Yeah.
Because that's what they do. They whisper into your mind. They whisper into your ear. They tell you all this garbage that's false.
Yeah. So these what you just referenced there, Jerry, this surah, so the whispers, if you look at the Arabic, is al-waswas.
Waswas.
Yeah, al-waswas. So that's, you can already tell that sounds like whispers. And we found that this is actually in, I think, modern day Arabic, they refer to that as obsessions. So again, it just goes back to looking at your research with regards to, I think, OCD. Is OCD mentioned in your research?
Yes.
And
it's part of it.
Yeah. And it just makes sense that these whispers are like a form of obsessions that, you know, Satan seems to get us in a loop. You know, these obsessions, like how can you put it? Like compulsions, OCD, obsessive compulsive disorder. So yeah, he's compelling us with these. You know, these voices are compelling us to do something, and they compel us to do it obsessively. You know, that's the way I see this ultimately with this OCD. But they don't attribute that to something from Satan or his minions. Ultimately, you know, they label that as a mental disorder. Yeah.
And psychiatry labeled almost everything a mental disorder.
Yeah.
I mean, and their only treatment for anything are their toxic drugs.
Yeah.
You know, I don't know if you guys dealt much with psychiatrists. I've dealt with them all my life.
Right.
I watched what they did in the state hospital. I watched what they do in the private hospitals. They only spend a few minutes with each client, maybe 15, 20 minutes at the most. Then they prescribe these drugs, and then they bring them back in a couple of weeks and say, well, how are your drugs doing? People are spiritual. The psychiatrists believe that all mental illness is due to some physical chemical imbalance of some kind.
Yeah.
And that was a lie put out by a drug company by the name of Eli Lilly when they came out with Prozac.
Right.
So they don't know what causes schizophrenia. They never have. But, you know, like somebody was saying, when they have to have something out of the confusion to make it look like they know what they're doing.
Yeah.
You know? So first they blame mothers. They said, "Oh, it's the mothers did something. That's why these people are crazy." You know, and the mothers went, "We didn't do anything. What we do?" You know, so they didn't buy that. So what they did is they then kicked it up into genetics. They said, "Oh, there's a schizophrenia gene.
Yeah,
there's a gene that's making people crazy."
Yeah,
you know?
My family members were told this. Yeah.
You know, what they did is they took it from mothers that were observable and kicked it up into an area where 99% of the human race could not research it. You know, genetics. You got to be a biology whiz geneticist to debunk that. So it took probably decades and how many geneticists are interested in studying schizophrenia?
Yeah.
Not many. So they got away with that for probably decades. Like, oh yeah, it's a genetic disorder. And then when they couldn't find a specific gene linked to schizophrenia, then they went, okay, it's a combination of genes. It's so complicated. Nobody in their right mind could ever understand it. Only geneticists could understand it, but it's the genes, and there's nothing you can do about it except take our toxic medications. So the geneticists finally caught up with them and said, listen, we don't see anything genetic. There is no genetic schizophrenic gene. There is no combination of genetic schizophrenic genes that we can find. Dump this garbage.
The proof is not there. They say there's proof, but the proof is not there when you go to look for it. Yep.
No, there's no proof.
Yeah.
And what happened is in the back in 1910 or something, the Carnegie and the Rockefellers took over the medical system.
Right.
With they paid off Congress to write laws saying that the only doctors that could be graduated from medical schools are the ones that have taken a pharmacology curriculum. Okay, so here's the drug companies right in there. They took over the medical system then.
Yeah.
Okay, and it's still going on today.
Yeah.
They're still teaching pharmacia in the medical schools.
It seems like to me the way they get it is once people have woken up to the lies, they've got a more impoverished group of people ready to get higher up in life. So now they will be the ones to study this for the hope of their future, whereas others have already woken up and now they're onto the alternative paths. So it's like they've always got their people ready. People like in other countries, maybe impoverished countries, people are looking for some way out. So it's like they've always got their next cattle ready to use to teach all of this.
Well, they control it. They control the universities.
Yeah.
They control the Senate. They control they have a very powerful, they're very rich.
Yeah.
So they have a very powerful lobby. They control the Congress. They control the Senate. They bought off these people. These laws that they've made, for instance, you look at what's happening here. Somebody who's schizophrenic and hearing voices that he can't control and out of control. They have to go to a psychiatrist first. Okay? They can't just go into a pharmacy and get that stuff. The psychiatrist charge them, I don't know, $100, $250 for a consult. Okay, after you wait for weeks to get in, because they've got everybody convinced that medicines are the only treatment for anything. So these psychiatrists are backed up for some of them for months. You get in there, he spends no more than an hour with you, probably 45 minutes at the most, gives you a diagnosis, which is a bunch of crap that they just made up, and then gives you a prescription for an antipsychotic drug that costs probably $800 to $1,000 a month to stay sane on if you get it from a pharmacy here. Okay, and then it's toxic on top of that. You can go, I live 60 miles north of the Mexico border. We can drive across that border there and buy all the antipsychotic drugs we want for a small fraction of what it costs in the U.S., and we don't have to go to a psychiatrist. You get them over the counter, like you get aspirin or Tylenol or something in our drugstores here, because those drugs are not abusable. Nobody in their right mind wants to take those. They're horrible. But the psychiatrists are ripping on, we got to control these drugs. We want the money. We want the control. We want the power. And we're going to hang on to these drugs. And we're not going to make them non-prescription. So in Mexico, you can go to a psychiatrist if you want. He'll write you out a prescription for a certain drug. It's an antipsychotic drug. You go to the drugstore and you just get it. And it's much cheaper. So here it'd be $800 to $1,000. There you can get a month's worth of antipsychotic drugs for $75. So that's how much of a markup they got on these drugs. And they're just squeezing people to death, and these are the people that can least afford it. People
whilst robbing them, whilst
robbing them or their families blind. And then they go, oh, the medical costs in the U.S. are out of control. And then there's certain drugs you can't even bring back. They're not dangerous, but you can't bring them across the border.
I mentioned just a little while ago that my family members were told this, what you were saying, from a psychiatrist, because I have a cousin who about, I think maybe 15, 20 years ago, when he first went to university, he must have ended up taking some kind of substance. Not sure what exactly. As people do. Again, I think everyone knows what happens when they go to university, all kinds of things you're experiencing for the first time. But in my cousin's case, something happened, especially to him, right, that didn't happen to anyone else that we knew of. And they said that, oh, he's got, it was just too much pressure. He's got some kind of chemical imbalance in his brain, as you said. They blamed it on genetics, put him on drugs. And now, as you said, what does it do? It just shrinks your brain. Yeah. So, it's sad to see that, yeah, people end up losing their lives when, because under the name of science, under the name of genetics, under the name of, some kind of predisposition that this is your fate. Yeah, this is the fate that God handed you. Astaghfirullah. It's not the case. You're being taught a bunch of lies. So I was just thinking that this sorcery and witchcraft is, these are things that we've been looking at, like many, for the last few years. And so,
Just one thing I wanted to say, Dr. Jerry, if these mental disorders were actually emanating from chemical imbalances or genetic defects, then the outcome would be physiological damage. But in no case of schizophrenia or other mental disorder such as OCD do you see any physical manifestation. It's always something ethereal, something etheric that the patient is reporting, and that thing is unseen. So just by logical thinking, you can completely disprove the notion that these are arising from chemical imbalances or genetic defects.
Yeah, matter of fact, they don't have a single objective test of any kind to verify any of those diagnoses that they have in that DSM of theirs. They treat that thing like the Bible. They every single one of those diagnoses have been made up. They've taken segments of human behavior and they turned them all into disorders. They tried to make them diseases, but the medical establishment says, no, these don't meet the criteria for diseases. There is no germ. There is no physiological anything that we can find, that would match the description of a disease. So they stopped them there. So they changed them into disorders. Okay. And this is their Bible. They have this big fat book of mental illnesses, they call them, or disorders, they call them. And they've virtually made them all up.
Yep.
Like I said, there's not any objective tests. There's no EEG, EKG, blood tests, lab work. There's nothing that can determine objectively any of these disorders. So that whole DSM of theirs is a complete work of fiction.
Yeah.
And it looks so official. You open it up and here's all these mental disorders and classifications and subclassifications and these numbers. I mean, it looks like something really scientific that somebody worked on for a long time. They're making a fortune selling these things. They need to have a diagnosis to charge the insurance companies.
Yeah.
They have all this lingo in there that it's psychobabble that they communicate with. So every single one of the more than 296 diagnoses or psychiatric disorders in the DSM-5 and later have been completely made up by a group of psychiatrists that meets once every 2-3 years, and they make them up while they're meeting. 2/3 of them are associated with Big Pharma. So they belong to Big Pharma. So they I heard it was like a tobacco barn auction. So the guy comes in and goes, "Hey man, I got a new psychiatric disorder here," and he reads it off, and they all determine, can we charge for it? Can we put it in the DSM? Will people buy this kind of thing? And can we come up with a drug for it? And then they vote them in and they vote them out. So each edition of this DSM, their psychiatric Bible, has more and more disorders in it. They just make them up. So in 1952, the DSM-1 had 106 psychiatric diagnoses in it. In 1980, there were 256. The DSM-5 lists 297, and they're fabricating more all the time. So basically, the DSM, their Bible is just a list of symptoms, behavioral symptoms, their behaviors that these committees of psychiatrists have debated and decided which clusters are a mental disorder. They're the ones that determine it.
We heard you in conversation with Owen Benjamin, and it was funny hearing some of those examples, Paris syndrome, just all kinds of made up things. But yeah, ultimately they seem like I read your what you shared with me. What was it? Black toads.
Oh yeah.
I have to say to people, I mean, they should check this out on your website. I read Black Toads and I literally jumped up. Yeah, in reading Black Toads, I was sat down at the table, I was reading it, and I jumped up because I realized this is true. That, you know, this doctor that is there saying this psychobabble which you're speaking about, which really isn't provable, it's nonsense, but it's some kind of sorcery that when that person now believes it, yeah, they're actually going to get this disease that they've been listening to and they believed from this person wearing a white coat. So now they've actually manifested, so you know, this within their body. It sounds like something, yeah, as you'd say, science fiction, but it's the truth. How we manifest our own beliefs by listening to these people in white lab coats.
Yeah, that was a true story.
Yeah.
So, you know, and they're spreading this pharmakeia stuff of theirs into the kids now. The number of children and adolescents in the United States on psychiatric drugs is now over 7 million and growing.
Yeah.
You know, more are starting. They're starting on kids younger and younger.
Yeah.
And 1 million of them are on antipsychotic drugs. These drugs destroy their brain, and they're putting kids on them.
Yeah.
You know,
brother Igor, sorry if I can, Jerry. Yeah, brother Igor, you've been sharing some very insightful stuff in the chat. If you want to comment, you've just said toads are used traditionally in witchcraft rituals. Yeah.
Yeah, just peace, brother. I just you know, when you mentioned the toads on your Telegram, I was just thinking like, well, that's usually what we associate with, you know, black cauldrons and, you know, I think in
imagery.
Like the ingredients for these kind of I guess you would call them potions, but today we would call them drugs.
Yeah.
So yeah, just interesting because we see this kind of imagery in fiction and fantasy movies, and part of us knows that there's something real about this unseen world, whether or not, you know, we understand like there to be a revelation or not. Everybody has a feeling or, you know, inclination that there is truth that we don't, that's outside of our perception. And you know, when Jerry was mentioning one time how these entities see us like cattle, it's very, very palpable that our society is structured in a way to basically reinforce that model, as if like the people that run the world are more or less following these things. And even in the Quran, we have so many references to cattle as an analogy for human beings, especially those that are actually blind in their hearts. They have eyes with which they do not see, ears with which they do not hear. They're actually more astray than what we would call livestock today, because they're not only a food source for these things, but they have no senses to discern with their reasoning that they're in fact being like really like farmed. You know, even the word pharmacy, it just kind of, it fits so perfectly, even the sound of these you know, words, because obviously language reveals so many, you know, truths. But I just listening to that story, man, that was really something.
Yeah.
That's a true story. I mean, I'll never forget that one. She
Yeah.
had actually murdered somebody, but she didn't come out and say it.
Yes.
Did that come across in the story?
Yes, it did at the very end. This was like someone could make a movie from what you experienced there. Yeah.
Yeah, I should put more of those stories out. I got lots of them.
Yeah,
You know, I've kind of.
But I mean, as far as we're concerned, in the Quran, self-defense is okay, or killing someone. I don't know. I mean, I'm not sure exactly what she did. Did she? Yeah, she killed her husband because. Yeah, this is interesting how it's
She killed the guy who she was molested as a child.
Yes.
And her young daughter was molested as a child.
Yeah.
So she killed the guy who molested her daughter.
Yeah.
And got apparently got away with it.
Yeah. Yeah.
You know, but she was very careful with how she worded that.
Yes. Yes. Exactly.
And Dr. Jerry, I've been meaning to say this, but like in my observation, mainly people who kill themselves in suicide, or people who really suffer with depression, oftentimes, if you really dig into their past, you can see that they've been sexually molested. And, with these recent coverages in media, for example, Epstein Island and all these things, we can see what the elites do in their secret parties. And eventually, I think what happens is these children who have been kidnapped and sexually molested, they just end up becoming drug addicts and severely depressed schizophrenics who end up killing themselves. And if I use my rationale, I can see that Allah has created us, God has created us as fortified beings, protected beings. And one of the main ways through which a person's psyche or a person's fortification can be weakened is by sexual molestation. I think it opens up that person to intervention from the dark realms, and we can see this.
It does a horrendous amount of damage, and the U.S. government right now is one of the biggest. They're complicit in one of the biggest child sex trafficking scandals on the face of the planet. You look at what is there, like 87,000 children that they've lost track of coming across the border. They didn't even have to have a place for them. All they had to have is an address, and they would ship these kids to these addresses. They're powering across the border by themselves, unprotected. They're damaging these youngsters that are going to be citizens horrendously. It's horrendous the amount of damage that does. Being a therapist, I deal with it frequently. It just really, really tears these people up. It makes a mess of them. And here's the government, protecting these child molesters. Look at all these people that went to Epstein Island, all these politicians that were there. And look how hard they fought to keep that Epstein list from becoming public information. They fought that tooth and nail for years. Finally it came out. What was it? The Catholic Church, when they find out these priests are molesting people, they don't get rid of them. They just move them somewhere else. I heard the Mormons did the same thing. It just does so much damage. These people should be executed, in my opinion. Just get rid of them. They cause so much damage to youngsters that it's incredible.
What you've shown, Jerry, in your research is that we become food source for these entities. I think it might have been in one of your discussions, you were mentioning how they need us. They can't experience anything, so they need us to experience. So if they want to drink, they need to drink through us. They need to eat through us. And this is ultimately what we believe. If we are not protected, then we become vessels for them. If we're not doing the right things according to the Quran, then we become vessels for them. And this is what Brother Muhammad was mentioning about these people with sexual trauma. So what I've seen is that they manipulate us by trauma, and that trauma could be imposed upon us, or it could be from us sinning. So therefore we've created a trauma of our own. That's how I see this. Either us sinning, which we are traumatizing ourselves, or we are actually innocent, we haven't committed any sin, and someone is committing that trauma upon ourselves. So either way, involuntarily or voluntarily, trauma seems to be the root to which all of this happens.
Virtually all psychological disorders are due to some kind of trauma. And then there lies on top of it. They don't mess with the trauma. You won't find 99% of the psychiatrists won't deal with trauma. All they do is give you drugs to kind of drug you down. They don't deal with the cause.
Numb you down.
Which the MACE energy method does. It deals with the cause of the mental illness, and in most cases will get rid of it in like an hour. But these people, the pharmacia, it was where this biochemical imbalance crap came from. I mean, this is another lie that they fostered on the entire population of the planet. Okay, it was not until late 1980s, after the release of the landmark antidepressant Prozac, that the idea of a chemical imbalance hit the psychiatric mainstream. Okay, so it didn't exist until then. So, as Peter Breggin, a psychiatrist in 1991, pointed out in his book Toxic Psychiatry, the drug company Eli Lilly advanced the chemical imbalance theory as a marketing scheme to sell their new drug Prozac. They made it up out of nowhere. They needed some explanation for why mental illness happens. So they didn't have one, so they just made one up. And they're teaching it in the universities now. It's a lie. There were no demonstrable evidence showing that the depressed patients had any kind of chemical imbalance. And it's the same thing with schizophrenics. There's no evidence of a chemical imbalance in their brain. But Eli Lilly ran with it. They knew it was a lie, and they put it out anyway. Before long, psychiatrists and psychiatric patients came to identify with the idea that mental disorders are caused by chemical imbalances in the brain. And it's a complete fabrication. It's a total lie. They have no evidence for it whatsoever. Matter of fact, I noticed that when I was working at one of the biggest psychiatric hospitals on the planet when I first went to work. I was brainwashed in school too to believe, oh yeah, mental illnesses are a chemical imbalance of the brain. That's what they taught us. And we didn't have any access to a clinical population, so there was no way for us to check that out. And we only began to get access to a clinical population a little bit in the master's degree. And then in the PhD, also, there was no access to a clinical population of any significant deal. I mean, you could not get into most mental health centers. You could not get into a psychiatric hospital. You couldn't get into a prison and work with mentally ill people. They would not let you in, nor will they let researchers into those places. In the entire, 45 years I spent working on the front lines of mental health, I never saw a researcher on the front lines. All this garbage comes out of the universities. So the universities are now pushing this false chemical imbalance theory. That's what they're teaching to the thousands of psychiatrists and psychologists that they graduate every year. That it's a chemical imbalance, and the only way to treat it is through their toxic drugs. It's a total fabricated lie that they've hit the entire planet with it. They've got the entire planet believing that the only way to treat any kind of mental illness is with their toxic drugs. The total fabrication.
Yeah, brother Joel in the comments, he says, hurt people. If you get that. Hurt people, as in people who are hurt other people. Yeah. So what we're experiencing is these people are truly hurt, and they are trying to hurt us. That's what it is. Yeah.
Exactly. And that's like that story, Black Toads.
Yeah.
That the mother was molested. Okay. And now the child was molested, and that just gets passed on.
Yeah.
Males who are molested, they molest others. It just goes on and on and on. It's got to be stopped.
Yeah.
And you look at the Western Mental Health Center. Here we have more psychiatrists, more psychologists, more psychiatric drugs on this planet than we've ever had in the history of mankind. Okay. there's over 50,000 people in the United States who commit suicide, who kill themselves every single year. A great majority of them on antidepressant drugs. You know, that's as many people as were killed in Vietnam. Year after year. This is just 1 year. It's year after year after year after year.
We're in a different kind of war, isn't it? Yeah.
It's a different kind of war. Yeah. So you know, and here they are pushing. You know, they have all these drugs, all these psychiatrists, and yet we're more mentally ill than we've ever been in the history of mankind. I mean, between 2000 and 2018, suicide rates increased 37%. An estimated 24 veterans are killing themselves every day in the U.S. You know, and from 2006 to 2016, the suicide rate increased by 2% a year, with 1.4 million suicide attempts in 2017 and 47,000 deaths. This is the report card for the psychiatric mafia and big pharma. I'd say this is a good solid F. You know, 10,000 Americans are diagnosed with schizophrenia every year. And schizophrenia is among the top 10 health problems on the planet. And they're pushing this.